All right, good morning. Welcome to a remote edition of the Daf Yomi. Thank you for everybody for understanding the traveling, but the Daf Yomi does not stop. So we've got Daf Yomi scheduled for this week, which we'll be sending out. This morning is remote, and then Amir Hashem will be back. We'll have an early start tomorrow on Tanis Esther, and then before Shachar start for Purim. The schedule will be sent via the chat, so please take a look for that.
You can be here. You can be here back. You can be here back in Toronto by tomorrow morning.
Back in Toronto, yes. So, all right, we are at Amar Le Abaye L'Rava, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines down from the top. So we're going to be speaking today mainly back about the Shnei Kivasim, the Shavuos offering, which is 2 sheep which are brought together with 2 loaves of bread, and we're mainly focused on the connection between the bread and the offering. That's what our issue is. And so here's what comes. Amar Le Abaye L'Rava. Abaye says to Rava, "My shno shnei kivasim de mikadshe lechem umeakve, umay shno shiva kivasim upar ve'elim de lo mikadshe lechem velo meakve." So we had mentioned that we have groups of offerings for each of the Yom Tovim. We made the distinction between those offerings which are in Parshas Pinchas, which are the Musaf offerings, and those offerings which are Parshas Emor, which are the offerings for the Yom Tov. Fine, we understand the ones in Parshas Pinchas are not connected to the ones that are in Parshas Emor. However, even in Parshas Emor, the korbanos which are slated for Shavuos are more extensive than just the 2 sheep with the 2 loaves of bread. We mentioned that there are the sheep. Then we also mentioned that there's a ram, and there's 2 rams. There's a bull. So the question that Abaye asks Rava is, why is it that all this time we're discussing how the sheep and the 2 loaves of bread are connected, but we don't presume that the 2 loaves of bread are connected to the bulls or the rams, right? Why is it that there's a connection between these sheep but not the other korbanos? Amar Le, so he said, he says the answer is because during the process of offering the 2 sheep, we wave the offering together with the 2 loaves. And since those are waved together, those 2 parts, the bread and the sheep, are connected together. So he says, okay, he says, but what are you going to answer about the Korban Toda then? The Korban Toda is also a Korban Shlamim, and it has bread which is brought together with it. So there's no tnufa, there's no waving of the Korban Toda together with its loaves of bread. And nevertheless, we know that the bread is connected to the Korban in such a way that if you don't have the bread, then it will ruin the offering, and vice versa. So there's no waving there, and yet they're connected. So you can't tell me that it's the waving that connects the 2. Ella kitoda. Ma toda shlamim af hacha nami shlamim. So rather, we're going to say is that the reason is because it's a shlamim. Shlamim connects to bread much more easily. So therefore, since all of these all the korbanos on Shavuos, the 2 sheep are shlamim, they connect to bread. That's because the toda also is a shlamim and it connects to its bread. So that's why. So mi dami, is that connected? Is that the same? Hasam lekas vachim achrini ba'adei. When you're talking about Shavuos, and when you're talking about the Korban Toda, there's no other Korbanos to connect with it. It's only a Korban Toda. So you've got the Korban and you've got the bread. So of course those 2 connect together. How can you compare that to on Shavuos, where you've got the 2 sheep and you've got a bull and you've got I understand that it's a shlamim, but that's not the same because there are all these other korbanos that it can connect to also. So the answer is if when it comes to Shavuos, there's other korbanos too, let the bread connect to these as well. Ella ke el nazir. The answer is we're going to compare the shtei lechem offering on Shavuos to the ram of the Nazir, which also comes, which says Ma'il Nazir, just like the rams of the Nazir, even though there's other korbanos, because the Nazir, you bring other korbanos together with it. So shlomim hu demekadche, it's the shlomim that helps the loaves of bread that come together with the Nazir offering. Midi achrini lo, not the other things. So hachanami lo shno. So here's also. So that's a great comparison. Nazir, there's lots of korbanos and there's bread. It's the shlomim of the Nazir that connects to the bread, not the other korbanos. So to here, by the Shavuos offering, it's the two sheep, which are shlomim, which connect to the bread and not the other ones. Okay, so that's a great answer, except for the fact of Hasam Minolan. How do I know that that's the case by the Nazir offering, right? The Nazir offering connects to the bread. How do I know? Detanyo, we learn in a brisa. Ves ha'ayil ya'aseh zevach shlomim la'Hashem. You should make the ram as a shlomim to Hashem, al sal hamatzos, on the basket of matzos. Melamed, so that teaches us, what's the connection there? Shehasal b'chova la'ayil, u'shchitas ayil mikadshon. He says that the loaves, the basket of matzos, comes as part of the obligation to the ram. And the shchita of the ram is what sanctifies those matzos. Lefichach, therefore, shchato shelo lishmo, if you slaughter it without being for the proper korban, lo kitchu alechem, then the bread is not sanctified. So we see that from the pasuk in the Nazir. Clearly, the pasuk indicates that the bread is connected to that offering. So we learn from there that also the bread is connected to the Shnei Kvasim by Shavuos. Okay. Now, Tana Rabbanan Rabbis learned, Shtei halechem habos bifnei atzman. We learned that according to Rabbi Akiva, right, you can bring the bread without the animal, right? So when it comes to the other alternate opinions, we said we can bring the offerings without the bread. Rabbi Akiva says the bread is the most important part. You can bring the bread without the animal. So what are you supposed to do? How are you supposed to? Because when you bring the bread offering, it's the throwing of the blood of the offering that allows you to eat the korban. That's to eat the bread. So if you have no korban to go with it, there's no blood to throw. So what are you supposed to do with the bread? So the answer is yunfu, you wave it, uber tsurason, and then you wait until it gets dark so that it's too late to be able to eat it. And then you go to burn it. Okay, so you wave it, but you can't eat it, as we're going to see. Well, what's the reason why you can't eat it? Is it you can't eat it because you can't eat it? Is it you can't eat it because of the Rabbanan? But we don't eat it, and then you got to wait till nightfall. Once it becomes invalidated because it got too late, then you can burn it. So that makes no sense, says the Gemara. Manavshach. Either way you look at it, right? Ila achila asyan. Is the bread supposed to be eaten? So then lichlindhu. So then go ahead and eat it. Why are you waiting and burning it? The ila sreifa asyan. And if the korban is invalid because you can't eat it without throwing the blood of the sheep, you can't eat it. So then lisrafin ulalter. So then why are you waiting till tonight? Burn it right now. I mean, if you can't eat it, then just burn it. Why are you saying wait until tonight? V'lama lehu iber tzura. Why does it have to wait? So Amar Rabba. So Rabba says liolam la'achila asyan. So answer number one. We're gonna go. I think there's three answers here. So number one. Okay. First answer is really you can eat it. The bread is edible. However, we're concerned we can't eat it, not because there's an invalidation. If the bread comes by itself, for sure you can eat it. But rabbinically, midirabbanan, the rabbanan are going to employ their old tactic, the shev ve'al taseh. Don't do a positive commandment because the rabbis are worried that you're going to come to do an avera later on if we let you do this positive commandment. So, for example, gzeira, what's the gzeira? Shema yizdamnu lahem kivasim l'shana haba. What's going to happen next year? We're worried about next year. Next year you'll have sheep and you'll have the bread. V'yomru, and people will say, Ishtakad, I remember what happened last year. Lo achalnu lechem below kvasim. Didn't we eat? We have the changing girsa with the little yud. There's a milo achalnu lechem below kvasim. Didn't we eat the bread without the sheep? Right? Last year there was no sheep, and we ate the bread. So this year also now achshav nami nechol. Let's go ahead and eat the bread without offering the sheep. right? But that you can't do. Inhu lo yadi, people will not realize that the only reason why you could eat the bread last year is because you didn't even have sheep. So you had no sheep, so you could eat it. Inhu sharyon nafshaihu, and so therefore, because they come by themselves, the bread permit themselves. Because they didn't come together. Once they got linked to a korban with sheep, then you got to throw the blood of the sheep in order to permit the bread. But if they come by themselves, then they're permitted and you can eat them. But but this year, now that we're bringing it properly with sheep, kvasim hu desharulu, you need to throw the blood of the sheep to permit it. And since people are going to make that mistake, which is interesting that we say that like the Beis Hamikdash, nobody would remind each other or any of but the Rabbanan were concerned about this. Therefore, they said, in a circumstance where there's only bread, I guess that would be very unusual, so people wouldn't necessarily remember that it was an unusual circumstance. And so, therefore, they said, don't eat the bread when it comes by itself. But you can't burn it right away because it's edible. So what you have to do is you got to wait until it's past due. Once it becomes too late, then it becomes invalidated, then you can burn it. Okay, so Amar Rabbah, so Rabbah says, Mina aminallah, where's my proof that this is the case? Ditnan. So we learned in a Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, so we had this before, so it's nice when we see Gemaras that we've had before, it helps us review, that Rabbi Yehuda says, Hayed ben Bukhri b'Yavne. Ben Bukhri testified in Yavne, Kol Kohen sheshoko enochote. Can a Kohen bring the half shekel? We're in the right season, right? The half shekel was going to be brought on Tanis Esther tomorrow. So can a Kohen bring a half shekel? So he says, Ben Bukhri says, if a Kohen brings a half shekel, it's all right. Now, what's the problem with the Kohen bringing a half shekel? The Kohen, if he's not obligated to bring a half shekel, and he takes his own half shekel and he puts it into the collection, then the korbanos that are being bought with personal money that belongs to the Kohanim. And we know that the money is supposed to can't be chulin. It has to be hektish. It has to be consecrated. So if a regular Jewish person has an obligation to give a half shekel, so then his half shekel is a mitzvah. So he puts his half shekel in, it belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. That's his mitzvah. But if a Kohen has no mitzvah, so he's giving a personal donation, his item is not consecrated. He puts it into the collection. Now you have non-consecrated money mixed in with the consecrated money. It presents a problem. But says Rabbi that Ben Bukhri testified that if a Kohen were to do that, it's okay. Why? Because we know the Kohanim, and when they make their donation, they're dedicating the money to the Beis Hamikdash. They don't keep the money as personal money, and so therefore, if the money goes into the treasury, it goes in as something which is a holy item, and it doesn't ruin the korbanos. So therefore, if a Kohen wants to voluntarily give a half shekel, even though he's excluded from the mitzvah, he can. That's what Ben Bukhri says. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said back to him, Lo ki ela kol kohen she'eino shokel chote. He says, no, you've got it backwards. He says, what we really should say is, if a Kohen neglects to give his half shekel, he's a sinner. Kohanim are completely obligated to give a half shekel. The Kohanim have it all mistaken. They're obligated to give a half shekel. So, as we said, Ella shekohanim dorsha mikra zila atzman. The Kohanim made a mistake. The Kohanim tried to get out of the half shekel by explaining the following pasuk incorrectly, and that is that the pasuk says, "V'chol minchas kohen kalil tiel lo se achel." The pasuk in Vayikra says that if a Kohen brings a mincha offering, as we've learned in the past, that a Kohen gets to eat a mincha offering that's brought in the Beis Hamikdash. But if a Kohen himself brings a mincha offering, he doesn't eat that. A Kohen's own mincha offering gets burned on the Mizbeach. So they reasoned as follows: a Kohen's offering that's brought in the Beis Hamikdash gets burned completely. Hoel omer ushtei alechem velechem aponim shalonu hein. They said, well, but take a look. We know that there are certain mincha offerings which are community offerings, like, for example, 3 examples: the korban haomer, the barley offering brought on the second day of Pesach, the shtei alechem, the 2 loaves of bread on Shavuos, and the lechem aponim. These are loaves of bread. And we know that the Kohanim are supposed to eat those offerings. So therefore, heich ne'acholin, how, if we give the half shekel, how are we allowed to eat it? Because the money is coming from us. So it becomes our korban. And we know the rule is that if we bring a korban, we can't eat it. So therefore, we can't bring a half. It must be that we don't bring a half shekel. So the Kohanim rationalized and came to the conclusion, erroneously, that they're not supposed to bring a half shekel. But in fact, they are. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan says, what we really have to tell the Kohanim is, you're wrong. You have to bring a half shekel. It's not your money, and therefore it's not a problem of you consuming these bread korbanos if you are consuming them with sorry, I don't know if I muted for a second, but you're not going to be you're not going to be in violation of eating a korban that belongs to yourself if you eat this. So hani shte lechem hechi dami. Okay, so now let's clarify the proof here, right? These two loaves of bread, what's the circumstance here? Because the question we're trying to ask is, if two loaves of bread come by themselves, do the Kohanim eat them or not? Okay, so how does this issue of the half shekel relate to that? So these two loaves of bread, hechi dami, what's the case we're dealing with? Ilema ba'os im hazebach. So if we're talking about the loaves of bread that come together with the korban shlomim, like a regular Shavuos day, like we would normally do it, why would that be a problem? We know that the Kohanim, right, if they bring a korban toda, then they bring an animal and they bring the loaves of bread with it. So the Kohanim eat the loaves of bread of their own korban toda. The Kohanim only don't eat a korban mincha if the korban mincha comes by itself. So it makes sense the lechem apanim is only bread. It makes sense the korban omer, which is only from barley. But the korban from Shavuos, why are they questioning whether they should be allowed to eat that one? That one comes together with a korban, an animal korban. And we know that Kohanim can eat the loaves of bread that come together with their own animal korban, like a korban toda. So why would they ask that question? El lav bibaos bifnei atzmon v'katani heich heinecholin amalachilason. Rather, it must be a circumstance where the korban on Shavuos, the shtei lechem, was brought without the animal. And they're asking, how could we eat it? Which means that it implies they could eat it. So this story implies that the Kohanim at the time understood that if they brought the two loaves of bread by themselves, they could eat it. And that's the proof that, who was it? Rabbi brings in order to show that the loaves of bread, if they're brought by themselves, are edible. Yeah, but Abaye says, yeah, that's not really a good proof because Amar le Abaye says, Liolam bibos im hazevach. No, really, we are, Yehuda, we're on the bottom, we're towards the bottom of Mem Vav Amud Beis, right? We're a few lines from the bottom still. When I count them up, but we're towards the bottom. I'll announce when we get to the top of the next page. So Abaye says
Amud Beis 3B3?
Yeah, probably so, yeah. B4, Jeff says.
All right.
B4. Okay, so he says, well, we're talking about the ones that we're really talking about when the loaves of bread are coming together with the animal. Okay, now you said, you had a question. You said, what about the fact that the Kohanim can eat the korban toda with its animal and its bread? So lachme toda lo ikri mincha. The answer is because you're misunderstanding. The loaves of bread that come together with the toda are not called a mincha, right? Because all it says is that Kohanim can't eat a mincha. A korban toda, the loaves of bread, are never called a mincha in the Torah. They're part of the animal korban. But shtei halechem ikru mincha. But the two loaves of bread that come together with the sheep, those are called a korban mincha. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, behikravchem mincha chadosh l'Hashem, when you bring a new mincha to Hashem. This is the new mincha. This is when you're going to be bringing the new wheat and you start consuming the new wheat in the Beis HaMikdash. So this is the new offering from the new wheat. So the korban shtei alechem is a mincha. So the reason why the Kohanim were saying that we're eating this korban, despite the fact that it's a mincha, and it's not a question from the korban toda, is because the korban toda is not a mincha. So therefore, it isn't a question. Of course, the Kohanim could eat the korban toda. The question was only on the shtei alechem. Even though it comes together with an animal, it's called a korban mincha. And therefore, the Kohanim wouldn't be allowed to eat it if it was theirs. That's why they made the question. Okay. So that's so therefore, Rabbah doesn't have a proof but he still suggests it, right? He still suggests that it's for eating. So now comes answer number 2. The question again, what happens when you've got these loaves of bread? We said, Rabbi Akiva said that you can bring them without the animal. Can you eat them or can you not eat them? So first answer was Rabbi. He said you can eat them. He tried to bring the proof. We don't really have a proof to his opinion. So Rav Yosef comes and he says answer number 2. Liolam l'sreif asya. No, you're supposed to burn it. So the question is, if you were supposed to burn the loaves of bread, why didn't we burn it immediately? Why did we wait till the next day, till it got old, and then burn it? So v'hainu taima de lo sarfin. The reason why we don't burn it is lefisha ain't surfin kodshim b'yom tov. Completely separate reason. When is the Shavuos offering brought? It's brought on Shavuos. You can't burn it on Yom Tov because you can't burn anything on Yom Tov. You can't light a fire on Yom Tov. Oh, but you can. The answer is you can only cook on Yom Tov, right? You can only do a malacha on Yom Tov, which you need for ochel nefesh. Just burning something for no reason, right? That you can't do on Yom Tov. You can't just do a malacha for no reason. So therefore, burning this korban on Yom Tov would be no good. So you got to wait till tomorrow, and you burn it tomorrow. Amar le Abaye. So Abaye says, one second, me dummy. How could you say, right? How could you compare the burning of these loaves of the shtei alechem, the burning of these 2 loaves, to the burning of other korbanos, which become pasul? If a korban becomes pasul, I understand. A korban becomes pasul, you can't burn it on Yom Tov. Why? Because you can wait till later, and it's not something it's not permitted on Yom Tov. However, hasam lav mitzvasam bekach. That's because those korbanos, that's not the proper way for them to be brought. That's not the mitzvah. However, halacha here by the loaves of bread, if the loaves of bread are being brought by themselves, the halacha is that the mitzvah is that they're supposed to be burned. So the mitzvasam bekach, the mitzvah is to bring them that way. So therefore, lisrafinhu, so therefore go ahead and burn it. Meaning, if I have a mitzvah, what am I allowed to light candles on Yom Tov, like the Yom Tov candles? Why? Because that's the mitzvah. Since I have a mitzvah, I'm doing a mitzvah. That's like doing something that's permissible on Yom Tov. So if the mitzvah is to burn these loaves of bread, so then you can burn the loaves of bread. It's not a problem on Yom Tov. Look, it's not even a Yom Tov issue. It's even Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, we could take the ram and the bull the goat and the bull of Yom Kippur, and since that's the way that offering is supposed to be brought, we can burn that on Yom Kippur. And so therefore, clearly, if that's the mitzvah, we said we always can do a mitzvah, do the mitzvah of offering the offering in the proper way in the Beis HaMikdash. So if the right way to bring 2 loaves of bread is to burn it, the fact that it's Yom Tov wouldn't be a problem. Okay, fair point. Ella Amar Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef changes his mind, and he says, really? Okay, you're still supposed to burn it, but he changes his mind as to why. Gezerah shemi yizdamnu lahem kivosim la'achar mikan. What we're worried about is the reason why we don't burn it right away is because who's to say we won't find more sheep? Why would we burn the bread? Keep the bread, and then if somebody walks into the Beis HaMikdash and says, hey, I've got sheep, then you can bring it with the sheep and everybody's happy. So don't burn it. Wait, right? There's no reason to be hasty and jump the gun and offer the loaves of bread without the sheep. We could just, there's nothing done to the bread. I have the bread. It's going to sit here. May as well wait. Who knows? Later on, somebody's going to come by with sheep and now I've got my full offering. So don't hurry up. Don't rush so fast. So just wait. So Amar le Abaye. So Abaye says to Rav Yosef, okay, Tinach calls man hakrovasam. I get it. Up until the point at which the offering can no longer be offered. There's a once, right? But lebasar hachi. After the korban tamid in the afternoon, all of the offerings of the day are offered between the korban tamid of the morning is the first offering of the day. The korban tamid of the afternoon is the last offering of the day. About Plaga Mincha, they're offering the korban tamid in the afternoon. After that, there's no korbanos. So I don't understand, says Abaye. I get why you're going to hold on to the loaves of bread until you do the korban mincha in the afternoon, right? Because somebody will walk in with sheep, and you could do the korban. That's great. But once you've already brought your afternoon korban tamid, there's no, like, even if somebody comes in with sheep after that, it's too late, right? You can't do korbanos after the korban tamid in the afternoon. So why do you have to wait until nighttime for it to get to turn so that you can burn it when you can't bring it as a korban anyway? Once you offer the sheep, once you already offer the korban tamid, you can't offer the sheep. So les rafinu, why don't you burn it right then and there, right after the korban tamid? So the answer is okay. He says, "My to uber turason nami diktani turas hakrovosam." Says Rav Yosef. That's exactly what I mean. When it says here that you're supposed to burn it after you wait for it to go bad, we don't mean for it to go bad like we normally do. Normally, when we say you have to wait for it to be bad, it means that you have to wait till nighttime, so it's no longer the time for it to be offered, and you can burn it then. Here we mean you wait till the time that you can't offer it anymore. When is that? That's after the korban tamid in the afternoon. That's what we mean. So therefore, you're right. You can eat. You're supposed to burn it, but we wait until, who knows? Maybe we'll get some sheep. After it becomes past the korban tamid in the afternoon, then we say, okay, we gave up. We can't offer. Even if somebody were to bring sheep now, there's nothing we can do about it. And you can go ahead and burn the 2 loaves of bread. Okay, that's how Rav Yosef goes. Okay, so now Rava Amar, Rava says, I'll give you the third answer. Rava says, Lachilasya. No, the loaves of bread are supposed to be eaten, right? And like we said, we know we're not eating them. We're waiting until they go bad, until nighttime, till they go bad. But we said we gave the first answer they were to be eaten. We couldn't bring a proof. Now we brought Rav Yosef's answer. They're supposed to be burned, and we changed it a little bit slightly. We thought we're waiting to the we're burning it in the afternoon. Now comes Rav. He says, no. Really, you're supposed to eat it, and you have to wait. And they told you not to eat it. Now ugzera mishum de Rabba. And I agree with what Rabbi is saying. Rabbi said before that the reason why we're not eating it is because next year we're going to make a mistake. And we'll think that if last year we ate the loaves of bread without the sheep, so this year, even though we have sheep, we don't have to wait until we slaughter it and throw the blood, and people will make that mistake. So I agree with what Rabbi is saying. But v'lav mitameh ela mikra. But I don't agree with what he says as the reason, right? The reason he brought was that whole story about the Kohanim, and they were saying that they don't bring the half shekel. It's not that. It's not that. Rather, it's because of a crutz, because of a pasuk. The Amar Rava, mina minallah. So Rava says, I'll show you where's my pasuk. How do I know that you're supposed to eat this? Dichsiv, the pasuk says, about the shtei lechem, mimosh vosechem taviu lechem tnufa, from your dwelling places, meaning that the wheat has to come from Eretz Yisrael. You're supposed to bring the bread that you wave, and it calls it, etc. ... Continuing on at the end of the pasuk, bikurim la Hashem. The loaves of bread are called bikurim. What is bikurim from the word bechor? They're the first ones to Hashem. But we know there's another mitzvah called bikurim. The mitzvah to bring your first fruit to the Beis Hamikdash and give it to the Kohen is also called bikurim. Ma bikurim, just like the mitzvah of bikurim, bifnei atzmon, they go by themselves, right? A farmer brings his first fruits. He doesn't bring any animal with it. They come by themselves. Af shtei alechem bifnei atzmon. So too the loaves of bread are allowed to be brought by themselves. And ma bikurim lachila, just like the first fruits are given to the Kohen and he eats them, af shtei alechem nami lachila. So too the loaves of bread are just like the mitzvah of bikurim, and they are eaten by the Kohanim. We're on Mem Zayin Amud Aleph, the top now. Okay, Tana Rabbanan, our rabbis learn. Kivsei atzeres, the sheep for this Shavuos offering. So ein mikadshin es halechem el b'shchita. So we're going to talk now. At what point does the bread connect to the sheep? We've already discussed whether you can bring the sheep without the bread, and whether you can bring the bread without the sheep. Now, let's talk about the circumstance where we're bringing the bread and the sheep together. When we bring the bread and the sheep together, we said everyone agrees that once the bread and the sheep are brought together, if you're missing one and not the other, then it's going to become invalidated. When is the link? When is it that the bread becomes part of the offering, right? So says this brisa, the shchita. Once I have in the possession of the Beis Hamikdash 2 loaves of bread and 2 sheep, and the Kohen goes in and he slaughters the sheep, then the bread is now connected to it. And as a result, the bread can be eaten when later on I throw the blood of these sheep. They're connected up until that point. And you can commit me'ilah. This is going to become our big issue. The bread becomes prohibited from other use, at the point at which the shechita takes place. Ketzad, here's how it works. Shchaton lishman, if the Kohen does the shechita and he has in mind for the proper Shavuos offering, Vizorak daman lishman, and then he does everything properly. He throws the blood from the sheep properly. Kadesh halechem, then the bread has been sanctified, and the Kohanim can eat it. Because everything's good there, right? He became sanctified through the slaughtering, became permitted to eat after he threw the blood, just like the rest of the meat of the korban, and everybody's happy. Shchatan shalolishman. However, let's say the Kohen messes this up and he slaughters it not for the right intent. So we know the halacha that when you slaughter a shlamim not for the right intent, the shlamim doesn't work for the purpose of the korban. However, it's a kosher korban. So he says, so he slaughters it not for the right intent, Vizorak daman shalolishman, and then he throws the blood also with the not proper intent. Lo kadash halechem. So then the bread never becomes sanctified because it was never slaughtered with the right intent. So nobody slaughtered it as the two loaves of bread, as the two sheep to go with the 2 loaves of bread. So therefore, the bread does not become sanctified. As a result, what holiness does the bread have? The bread never obtains. We have 2 different levels of kedusha, right? When something is purchased using the funds of the Beis Hamikdash, it has a holiness called trumas alishka, right? It's a financial sanctity, and it basically is the same thing as having money that belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. I could take this bread and I can redeem it, buy something else with it. I could trade it for something else. The bread then leaves the possession of the Beis Hamikdash, and the item that it's purchased for becomes holy and sanctified. The item itself is not sanctified as a korban. It's only sanctified with financial sanctity. When something becomes a korban, so then it obtains what we call kedushas haguf, a bodily sanctification that cannot be removed from it. Right, it becomes a sacrifice. This bread gets kedushas haguf only when you slaughter the animals. So since you slaughtered the animal not for the sake of the korban, the bread never became connected to the animal. Therefore, the bread never becomes sanctified at that higher level. Therefore, the bread, right, is not lo kadosh halechem. The bread is never sanctified at kedushas haguf level. It remains only sanctified as something purchased by the funds of the Beis Hamikdash. Right, a person can't just walk off with it, but it can be redeemed. It can be purchased back out of the Beis Hamikdash's possession. Shchatan lishman. Now, let's say they do shchita for the sake of the korban, vizorak daman shelo lishman, but they don't do the throwing of the blood properly. So now halechem kadosh ve'eno kadosh. Divrei Rabbi. The bread is sanctified, but it is not sanctified. So what does that mean? We're going to see what that means. The Gemara is going to discuss what that means, right? And that's what Rabbi says. And Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon says, Liolam Eino Kadosh. No, it's not sanctified. The sanctification, unlike the first part of this brisa, the process of sanctifying this bread is that you need a 2-step process. Eino kadosh ad yishchot lishman v'yizrok daman lishman. You have to do both things. It's not sanctified until you slaughter the sheep and you throw the blood of the sheep. Once you do both of those things, then the bread gets elevated to a status of kedushas haguf. Before that, they're not elevated. So now let's figure out what's going on here. My time of the Rebbe. What is Rebbe's reason? Rebbe says, it's a 1-step process. Once you do the shechita, the bread is now sanctified. If you don't do the zrika, so he has this concept that it became sanctified, but it's not completely sanctified. We'll discuss what that means. But he holds that the shechita by itself is able to accomplish something. Why does he hold that way? Dichsiv, because he looks at the pasuk and it says like this: V'sa'ayu ya'aseh zevach shlomim la'Hashem al sal hamatzos. The ram, right, by the Nazir, which is critical because the way we learn the 2 loaves of bread by Shavuos comes from the pasuk by Nazir, as we learned earlier. So therefore, by the pasuk by Nazir, it says the ram that you're making into a zevach, a slaughtered offering, as a shlomim to Hashem, is on the basket of matzos. Lememra, the shchita mekacha. That tells you that at what point that is it critical that the basket becomes connected? By the time that there's a zevach, when it becomes slaughtered. When you slaughter the shlamim, then the basket of matzos becomes sanctified. So that's it. It's a 1-step process, right? One step. You make it a zevach, you do the shchita, and now it is sanctified. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon says, no, read the pasuk. It says, Ya'aseh. There's a two-step process. It says, Ya'aseh zevach, you do a slaughtering, and then you have another step called Ya'aseh, another step to do. So it's a two-step process. Slaughter it, and then do something else. What's the something else? Throw the blood. So the bread becomes sanctified once you do both steps. You slaughter it, and then you throw the blood. You have to do both steps. V'Rebbi nami haksiv ya'aseh. So what about Rebbe? What does he do with that pasuk? It says ya'aseh. There's another step. How come he doesn't figure there's another step? So the answer is iksiv zevach ya'aseh kidekamar. You're right. If the pasuk would have said slaughter it with the word zevach first and then the word ya'aseh after it, meaning slaughter it and then do something else, so then you'd be right. However, v'hashtu dechsiv b'meh ya'aseh zevach. It doesn't say that. It says you shall make it into a slaughtered offering. It doesn't say a slaughtering offering, you shall make it. So that means, what is the action that you're supposed to do? One action, the zvicha, the slaughtering. Therefore, Rebbe says, I read the pasuk that there's only one step. It's a slaughtering, right? Only the Rabbanan are reading it as that you're a two-step process. You slaughter it and then you do something else. Okay, fine. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, haksiv zevach. What is Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon? The sanctification, if you have a two-step process, means that really it's the throwing of the blood that's sanctifying it, right? Not the shchita, not the slaughtering. So then, what do you do with the word zevach? That the slaughtering seems important, right? In the pasuk. Well, what does he do with that, right? Haksiv zevach. So the answer, that I need because of what Rabbi Yochanan said. Dama Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, Hakol modim, everyone agrees, whether you're Rebbe or Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon, lechem bishas shchita. You can't have the bread become sanctified without the slaughtering. Meaning, let's say the Kohanim are in a rush, and the bread is in the oven. It's not ready yet. So the Kohanim come and they slaughter the animal, there's no bread there. And then they come running in, here's the bread, and then they throw the blood. Everyone agrees that's no good. Whether you're Rebbe who says all you need is shchita, you didn't have shchita, or whether you're the Rabbanan who hold that you need zrika, but you also need shchita. So the bread can't come in later in the process. You've got to have the bread at the beginning of the shchita, right? The only argument is whether you need the bread also whether you need zrika also, right? According to Rabbi Shimon, according to Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, you also need the zrika. According to Rabbi, you don't. Okay, so therefore, they all agree that you need the shechita. Okay, fair enough. But let's understand what it is that Rebbe holds. Okay, Rebbe says, "My kadosh ve'eno kadosh." What does he mean? The bread was there for the shechita. I slaughter it. It becomes, but I didn't do the zrika properly. If I did the zrika properly, no problem. The Kohanim go ahead and eat it. He says that it's kadosh, but it's not kadosh. What does that mean? So Abayi says, kadosh ve'eno gomor. Right? It's kadosh, but it doesn't become completely sanctified. It doesn't become completely sanctified. We're going to explain what that means in a moment, right? How do you have something that's sanctified but not completely sanctified? Rav Amar kadosh ve'eno niter. Rava says, no, it's very simple. It is completely sanctified. You just can't eat it, right? The bread became sanctified when you did the shechita, but the Kohanim can't go and eat it until you've done the process of the zrika. The zrika permits it to be eaten. You didn't have it when you did the zrika, so you can't eat it. Okay, fair enough. So the bread becomes sanctified. I can't eat it. Fair enough. I understand what Rava means, but I don't understand exactly what Abaye means, because Abaye ultimately means it gets some elevated level of sanctification, but it's not completely sanctified. So what does that mean? That means they can't eat it. So, my beinaihu, what is the practical difference between what Abaye is saying and what Rava is saying? Both of them say it's sanctified in some kind of level that's above where it was, but you can't eat it. So, ika beinaihu lemitfis pidyono. The question is, can you ultimately redeem this? If somebody comes along and says, I want to exchange money and buy this bread back so that I can now buy more bread later on for another korban. Right? Can the Beis Hamikdash do that? So le'abaye, according to Abaye, so then lo tofis pidyono, right? The bread is sanctified, but it isn't completely elevated to a complete level of sanctification. Because it's in some kind of limbo zone between levels of sanctification, it isn't even sanctified strong enough to allow me to redeem it back out. and this bread is stuck. It can't be bought, it can't be used, and it can't be bought back. So therefore, it has to be destroyed. There's nothing that you can do with it. L'Rava, but according to Rava, he says, Tafis pidyono, it's a complete sanctification. And so therefore, right, it's not permitted, I can't use it. But if somebody wants to purchase it back, so then it can be turned back to chulin by somebody buying it, right? You can buy it back out. So Bishlam Rava, I understand Rava's opinion, right? Hainu deika bein Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. Then I understand what the difference between Rebbe and Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon is, right? Both Rebbe said that it's sanctified, but it's not completely sanctified, which means that it's completely kadosh, but you can't eat it, but you can purchase it back. And Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon says that you need a two-step process. So what does that mean? You need a two-step process. Once step one from the process comes, so then you can't redeem it back out, right? Right, that it's not sanctified, so you can't buy it back out, right? It's stuck also in limbo. So I understand the difference between Rebbe, who says it's sanctified completely, and Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, who says it's not sanctified completely. I at least see the practical difference between the two opinions. El Abaye, but according to Abaye, Ma'ika bein Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. Ultimately, then, Rebbe, who says it's sanctified, but it's not completely sanctified, which means that it's elevated, I can't use it, but I can't buy it back. And Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, nah, it's not sanctified until I've got Zrika, says the same thing. It's elevated, but I can't buy it back, so it's the exact same. What's the difference between the two of them? So the answer is, Ika beinahu livsule biyotze. The question between them is as far as whether this, if this bread is taken outside of the Azara, whether that invalidates it, right, after the Shechita. According to Rebbe, right, this elevation process takes place at the Shechita. The Zrika has nothing to do with it other than I'm just getting a phone call. The Zrika doesn't elevate, according to Rebbe, doesn't elevate it anymore. It just permits it. Right, and so once it's already elevated, and regardless of the permission, if I take it outside of the Azara, outside of the area where it can be eaten, it becomes invalidated. So that ruins it. Right, according to Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, the korban isn't completely sanctified yet until after the Zrika. So therefore, if I do the Shechita and then I take it outside of the Azara, so it doesn't become invalidated yet because it wasn't completely sanctified. If then, right, if you brought it back into the Azara at that point, and then you did the Zrika in a kosher way, then the Zrika would validate it and everything would be fine, right? So this is this issue. If the korban is 100% sanctified after Shechita, then it can be ruined because the korban can't go out of the Azara. If you're korban Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, it's not a regular korban. It's not a complete korban yet. So taking it out of the Azara, outside of the courtyard, doesn't invalidate it. That's the difference. Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak me Rabbi Chia bar Abba. So Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak asked Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Kivsei atzeres, the two sheep from Shavuos, sheshachton lishman. Let's say you did the shchita in the right way. V'zarak daman shelo lishman, and now you throw the blood not the right way. So we know that you're not going to be allowed to eat it, right? Oso alechem mahu lachila. He says, can you eat it? Well, 1 second. Aliba daman. We know that you can't eat it. According to whose opinion are you asking this? Aliba de Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. If you're going to ask me according to Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, Hamar Zrika he de mekadsha. He says that the bread isn't completely sanctified even until you throw the blood. So if you didn't throw the blood, of course it's not sanctified. Of course you can't eat it. The Aliba de Rebbe, and even if you're going according to Rebbe, who says the shechita completely sanctifies it, Bein l'Abaye, bein l'Rava, it doesn't matter whether you're going according to Abaye or you're going according to Rava, kadosh ve'no nitar. They hold it sanctified, but you can't eat it. So kadosh ve'no nitarhu. So where are you asking this question? We seem to think that according to everybody, there's no way that if you do shechita, nobody says you can eat it. Why are you asking the question? If I do shechita, can I eat it? So he answers, Ella alibet the haitana. You're right. I'm not asking according to Rebbe. I'm not asking according to Rabbi Shimon Lazar. I'm asking according to a different third viewpoint, and that's going to be Rabbi Akiva's viewpoint. Here's what we know about Rabbi Akiva. Actually, I'm not going to tell you what we sold Rabbi Akiva. It's 850. We're going to pause here. We'll go into Rabbi Akiva's Shita tomorrow.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rabbi Loiterman.
All right.